Hey guys, welcome back to my journey with digestive health, trying to get my gut in a good spot after months of bloating and years of really funky digestion in terms of stool, which is not the most popular topic, but is a really key indicator of how our digestive health is. And that's something I'm going to talk about in the next video, but today I'm going to be talking about fiber. So whenever a conversation about digestive health comes up, inevitably there's going to be a discussion around fiber. Now, for those of you who have been in bodybuilding, you might have a mixed relationship with fiber. A lot of times in bodybuilding, we don't use a lot of high fiber foods. Now, traditionally, the bro diet did include a lot of broccoli, but over time, a lot of coaches have steered away from that because of how difficult it is for many people to digest broccoli. And especially for high-level athletes in a growing season, with the amount of food volume you're having to take in overall, you really have to limit fiber or else you become overly full and it slows down digestion too much to be able to get in the amount of calories that you need to grow effectively. So this discussion has to be taken in context as to what your goals are and what your overall caloric intake is, but also what your individual tolerance is. So when I started addressing my digestive health, the first thing that I realized was how sensitive I am to fiber. And I was conflicted. A few months ago, I did keto. During that diet, at first, I was eating a lot of animal proteins, fats, and vegetables. I was okay with it because the base diet didn't have a lot of fiber outside of those vegetables. And even still, when I was really trying to get my ketones up, I was limiting vegetables significantly in order to try to offset the amount of carbs that I was taking in. With that, I ended up inevitably reducing my overall veggie intake. Before you go any farther, please remember to like and subscribe. Click the button now to support the channel and make sure I can still continue making this content for you. When I went back to a balanced diet, I reincorporated veggies along with other fiber sources and found that my digestion just started to get worse. And I struggled because performance-wise and recovery-wise, I was feeling a lot better on a balanced diet that did incorporate some carbs. But suddenly, I was feeling bloated every single day. I was having gas and stomach pain every night that would keep me up throughout the night, and I'd wake up still feeling full, and then that would make it difficult to start eating again the next day. And then eventually there was this psychological component of feeling very bloated and uncomfortable at night, and so I was avoiding eating at night, which would then leave me with this small window of eating and very few options. So after a couple of weeks of playing around with food sources, I had trouble really overcoming this doctrine in my mind that if you want a healthy diet, you have to eat vegetables. Yet every time I would eat vegetables, I would have digestive symptoms within a few hours, which makes sense. Vegetables slow down digestion because of the fiber content. And so if you're gonna have issues, usually you'll notice it a few hours later, usually not right after a meal. So being able to track all of these parameters is what creates that awareness enough to try to figure out what is working, what isn't, what your triggers are, and what are your safe foods. Now, when it comes to fiber, one thing we have to understand is there are different types of fiber. So we typically talk about soluble and insoluble fiber. So what does that mean? These are fancy words, but they each have kind of different functions in the body. It's important to note that a lot of foods that contain fiber contain both soluble and insoluble fiber. They're usually just categorized based on which they contain more of. Soluble fiber dissolves in water, and it absorbs water and creates like a gel that coats the stomach that can help prevent the stomach from being damaged by the acid content in the stomach, and it can coat the colon as well, which helps with colon health. Now, These fibers are great to incorporate. They help reduce blood glucose, they help reduce blood cholesterol, and help with satiety. Both soluble and insoluble will help with satiety. Common foods that contain soluble fibers are oats, barley, nuts, seeds, flax, beans, lentils, fruits such as oranges and strawberries, some vegetables like carrots and broccoli, sweet potatoes, tofu, and psyllium husk. Now, insoluble fiber doesn't dissolve in water, so insol, not soluble, not dissolving in water. Those fibers are pretty much undigested. So when they pass through the body, they pass through the body without changing much. What's the point of this if our body can't really use them? Well, it adds bulk to our stool. So for bodybuilders, a lot of times, these are the ones that will stay away from more because that's what's gonna add more bulk. And a lot of times, if you're eating a lot of food, you probably don't want more bulk in your digestive tract. Not only because it's gonna slow that digestion, which is going to make it difficult to get in another meal in 2 hours, but also because when your digestive system is working to move food through it, that requires a lot of blood flow. And blood flow that's going to the digestive system is not as effectively getting out to our skeletal muscles. That said, these fibers are really important, and adding bulk to stool is important for regularity. So this is about tolerance and finding the amounts that work well for you. We want to prevent constipation. And if we aren't eating enough insoluble fiber to help move that stool through the colon, then eventually we're going to become constipated. And that's something that we'll see especially later on in prep when people aren't eating large volumes of food and probably aren't also getting a lot of fiber. There's just not enough food to really push through the intestines. Now, these fibers include things like whole wheat, wheat bran, nuts, certain vegetables, and like the skins of vegetables. And again, the vegetables that have soluble also usually have insoluble as well. Now, both help food move through the digestive system. They also help reduce blood glucose spikes. In a way, fiber coats the carbs so that it's slower to break down in the body, and so it's slower to elevate the blood glucose in the bloodstream. Again, with bodybuilding, that's why we often see the use of things like white rice, where it's already been removed of its outer casing so that the body isn't having to do as much work to digest, and so that blood glucose is readily available for us to use in the gym. Both also help with satiety, that fullness effect, and that can be helpful in a bodybuilding prep, can be helpful for normal lifestyle purposes when you're maybe not trying to gain a lot of weight, just to maintain that sense of fullness and satiety. And both are really important for creating a diverse microbiome. If you've studied gut health at all, you've probably heard that term microbiome. But basically, there's a ton of bacteria in our guts. We often think about things like probiotics, like we're putting in some healthy bacteria in our guts. But there's tons of different strains of bacteria in our gut, and they feed off of these fibers. So we want to make sure that we're feeding the bacteria, promoting the good ones that are then contributing to other bodily processes, including things like hormone health and mental health. Now, we don't quite know how all of this works yet. It's still a budding science, but we do know that fiber intake is related to improved health and performance in these areas. So it's worth venturing a guess that making sure that you're getting diverse fiber and enough fiber is helpful for promoting a healthy microbiome or environment for your gut. There's another type of fiber as well that's fermentable, and it will contain both soluble and insoluble. But these are the things that ferment in the gut, and then the bacteria also feed off those significantly. Things like onions, things like artichoke, oats as well. Your gut bacteria will feed off of these foods. Now, what's important to note is that you may not tolerate all fiber very well. And that's what I ran into a couple weeks ago. When I was really trying to figure out what was aggravating my digestion consistently when I was eating broccoli, zucchini, stir fry, a Normandy blend, it all seemed to really bother my gut. And it got to the point where my gut was just so inflamed, and it seemed like there was so much gas being produced by these bacteria in my gut that even if I had something small, it just exacerbated an already difficult situation happening inside my digestive system. So what did I do? I cut out vegetables. I know, collective gasp, because I am all about health. I am all about sustainability and balance, and I think it's really important that we're getting all the micronutrients that we need. However, if our gut is inflamed and irritated and we're experiencing all these symptoms, it's a good sign that we're probably not putting a lot of these nutrients to use in the first place. So the first thing you want to do if you're experiencing some of these symptoms that I mentioned, such as severe gas and bloating, discomfort, like overly full feelings, pull out some of those more complex fibers. Broccoli is a very common irritant. The fermented fibers are usually common irritants. So although they're good in a compromised environment, they may not benefit us as well. So again, context and individual tolerance is really important to test here. And that's why I highly recommend keeping a daily check-in sheet or some kind of journal process that allows you to reflect and review your digestive symptoms in relation to the timing of your meals and the types of foods that you're eating. Now, as my digestion started to get better, because I started really looking into what foods are going to promote good gut microbiome diversity, how can I continue to get fiber? Because if I'm not getting any fiber, I find that either I have loose stool because there's not enough bulk, or I feel constipated because there's not enough bulk pushing things through. And so I knew I had to incorporate some fibers. A common misconception is that all of our fibers are going to come from vegetables. But those lists that I mentioned earlier contain a lot of foods that are not vegetables at all. And we can get a good variety from things other than vegetables. Fruits are usually really easily digested for most people. Now, if you have blood glucose issues, that may not be your best option, and it may be better to stick with things like whole grains and maybe lentils. Some people tolerate beans pretty well if they're prepared properly. So it's important to try out things to figure out what works for you. But after that initial phase of pulling fiber out, you want to reincorporate some fibers to ensure that you are supporting your long-term gut health. Often, people will shift to something like keto and experience improvement in digestive symptoms. Now, if they're pulling out a lot of processed foods, that can always be the reason as well, but some of it's just because there's not as much fiber coming in that can be pretty stressful on the digestive system if it's compromised. But over time, we kind of reduce our ability to digest those fibers because we're not promoting the bacteria that are meant to digest them by actually feeding them. What you feed thrives. So if you pull out fiber completely, you're probably not going to be able to digest fiber. In the same way, I have clients who say they're lactose intolerant, so they avoid dairy products for a long amount of time. They do have a lot of issues. But if we slowly incorporate high quality dairy, they actually don't have issues because it's like you're conditioning your body and you're priming your microbiome to be able to digest these things. It doesn't work for everybody, which is why it's important to understand your individual circumstances. But taking that time is really vital, and it's super helpful because it allows you to expand your diet again instead of just eliminating foods out of fear and out of just being overwhelmed by these symptoms that never seem to end. So for myself, I found that I can't really eat a lot of vegetables. Now, I've been able to reincorporate some. I've added in things like beans and lentils. I can have seeds. I'm allergic to nuts, but that would be a good option. Fruits seem to work pretty well for me. And occasionally I can add in some other fibrous veggies like sweet potatoes, which again aren't super high fiber. And I found that I can have frozen steamed spinach and don't have any issues with that. So I'm slowly testing over time my tolerance for fiber, and I found that I've been able to increase fiber from about 10 grams a day, which is pretty low, up to 30 to 50 grams a day, which is in the optimal range. If you can get to 30 to 35 grams of fiber, that's really great for gut health according to the research. But make sure that you're giving different sources a shot. I've also learned that combining different sources doesn't always work for me. So I incorporate a lot of my high fiber foods such as raspberries, seeds, psyllium husk, flax seeds. I incorporate that into yogurt and kefir or kefir. And because I digest yogurt and kefir pretty easily, adding some fiber on top of that isn't too hard. But if I were to eat a salad and put a bunch of nuts and seeds on top of it, I would have issues because it's just too much at once. So it's important to test your tolerance and increase it over time. Don't make rapid swings from low fiber to excessive fiber. Remember, in the initial stages, it might be worth cutting out fiber for a week just to allow that inflammation to come down, eating foods that are pretty easily digested, and then slowly reintroducing things that you seem to tolerate, but taking it just a couple of sources at a time so you can really pinpoint what does and doesn't work for you. And then ideally over time, you'll increase your ability to tolerate different types of fibers and learn what works well for you. So this is my official permission to stop eating vegetables. But remember, if you cut out a food group, you have to make sure you're getting those nutrients from elsewhere. I like to, every so often, check in with this app called Chronometer, or they have a desktop app as well. And I plug in all my food and I make sure I'm getting all of my recommended daily nutrients. If you're pulling out any food group, whether you're going keto or you're going vegan or you want to pull out veggies, you need to make sure that you're still meeting your micronutrient needs. I like to incorporate something like athletic greens every day, which helps fill the gaps for me. And more recently, I've been adding in some broccoli sprouts, which are like the little baby seedlings of broccoli, but contain tons of micronutrients per the weight. And that's an easy way to get in a lot of calcium, a lot of iron, some vitamin C, without trying to digest a large broccoli stalk that my body just absolutely rebels against. I'll be posting a recipe soon where you can see how I incorporate those secretly and kind of trick myself into eating some veggies, but also in a way that's really easily digested. So I hope this was helpful. This was a big part of my journey so far on just optimizing my digestion. Fiber is really important, and I understand that for some people it's becomes a fear food because it's something that causes a lot of digestive distress. So understand, it's important to take that time if you need to pull out fiber and then slowly reintroduce. But try out some of these other fiber sources and see if they work for you. Not everyone is meant to eat broccoli. But if you're not going to eat a large food group such as vegetables, make sure that you are incorporating foods that are still giving you those fibers to keep your digestive system regular. Thank you guys for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Share this with anyone that you know who has been struggling with gut health, and I hope that this was helpful. I'll be sharing more of my gut health journey in the weeks to come, including a full day of eating on a training day so you can see what an actual full day of eating looks like, and more to come on education around digestion optimization with all the things I've learned around supplementation and water intake and everything in between. So remember, like, subscribe, comment, share. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.